And welcome in on a Thursday here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. You know the deal. Comments and questions in the chat. And this is the College Football Show, Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We do need to let you know, though, on Friday, we won't be here at 4 Eastern. Thanks to you and thanks to Tukey G taking me up on my offer. We're going back to late nights once per week based on your request. Once per week, late night. So that's going to be Friday night, 11 p.m. Eastern Time with you. So mark it down. Tell your friends. Tell your family. Get it out there on social media. Let's bring in 2 or 50 from each of you for the big call-in show coming up Friday night, 11 p.m. Eastern. Then we'll decide during the show who out of you will make the selection for next week when we do the big late night call-in show. The Amazon link's in the description section. When you shop on Amazon, please use the link that we provide. And let's get to our first guest, our guest today, because this guy is out in front of the many changes in college football, just about better than anybody I know. We've had the pleasure of getting to know each other a little bit here in the last couple of years. And Greg Pflugar from Peek Around the Corner College Football has some amazing content over there. So check him out on a regular basis. And here's Greg to help us out with all that's going on concerning college football. Greg, great to have you.
I appreciate you. I appreciate the invite, Mark. I think we're all sitting on the knife's edge on what is going to happen with this House NCAA settlement. Is it going to get codified? It needs to get codified for this thing to survive. I know a lot of people are against parts of the settlement, and I completely understand it. But if it doesn't happen, if it doesn't survive, Mark, that $2.8 billion back pay, that's going to go straight up, and we are going to be in a world of hurt. So hopefully we get a miracle shot out of Capitol Hill. Hopefully a miracle happens and there's some sort of carve out, something that can make it so the rules that were based upon the settlement can be enforced and not get crushed by future lawsuits and things of that nature. So yeah, it's a crazy time to be a college football fan.
So Greg, based on the sources that I've read, but most importantly, based on the direct quotes coming from Judge Claudia Wilkin, it sounds like all that needs to be settled are I's to be dotted, T's to be crossed in the manner of, first of all, this grandfather clause in regards to roster limitations, of course, cutting from wherever these particular teams are now, typically in the 120 to 125 range, it appears, by most of the teams that I look at, down to 105. She certainly wants to, be a bit gracious to the current athletes to not just cut them off on July 1st and say, boom, get rid of 20 players. And then, of course, we're just focused on football, but across the board in college athletics, where either there's a phasing out of that or it's just grandfathered in that the current athletes would be okay. And it would be a stipulation going forward with the freshmen that are brought on starting here in 25, 26.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of embarrassing that Judge Wilkins is the one who is bringing up the godfathering this in, because that really should have been, in my opinion, part of the negotiations between all the commissioners, the NCAA, and the House lawyer, the House and his lawyers. That should have been really that should have been in play already, don't you think? That should have already been agreed to. That seems to be a reasonable, I don't know. So
Absolutely.
Hopefully that gets done. But some teams have already cut a whole bunch of guys. I mean, West Virginia has, we don't know the names. I mean, we're going to find out when they go into the portal, April 16th. But there are already programs who finish up their spring ball, and they've already had those difficult conversations. So I don't know how you put the toothpaste back in the tube in that situation. But yeah, hopefully that can work out.
The first time I heard about the back pay situation, that's been months and months and months ago. Mm-hmm. I thought that I came across some type of understanding of why that kicks in 2016. Do you know why there's this magical cutoff of roughly 2016, I believe, is the year in regards to it just being back
I
pay for the last 10 years, roughly?
I don't remember, but yeah, there was a magical cutoff date, and then this settlement goes for 10 years. I don't know what it is. I don't remember though. Great question, but
So Greg, this is what I'm fascinated by, and I want to get your thoughts, of course. So we're sitting on a number of $20.5 million, and people are focused on football, but let's understand that's for the entire athletic program for each one of these universities. Now, obviously, most of it's going to go to football, but so my first interest in this is the approach of each one of these universities to say, are we going strictly by the bottom line? And football brings in 88%, they're going to get 88% of this distribution, or, and on down the line. Or does Title IX get involved, some equity approach to it, that sort of thing. So that's my first question to you, just in regards to how you think that's going to be handled. And then what's even more fascinating to me, Greg, is that once the football program gets a hold of whatever amount of money that is, let's say it's $19 million, how are they going to distribute that money to players and evaluate players? Our left guard's a little better than our right guard. You talk about a mess.
I think fascinating is the correct word, and I was praying that this would all be public knowledge, like the Ohio State Buckeyes, right? Whatever they're going to do with the rev share, let's say it's 17.5 million. I was hoping that we would know what you guys are paying for your backup left tackle, because the content, the amount of incredible content and just that storyline is unbelievable. But for now, I don't think any of this is going to be public. I don't think the rev share salary is going to be made public. But I don't know for that. I don't know that for sure. In regards to how every athletic department is going to handle it, I think I've been talking about that forever. I think it's one of the most fascinating parts of it. Now, again, the back pay settlement was 75% to the football players, 15% to the men's basketball players, 5% from the women's basketball players. I might have a little bit of that wrong, but something like that. So you can kind of have a rule of thumb. That's how the athletic departments are going to handle it, but not quite, because some of this is going to be internal politics, like the University of Minnesota. As I don't know, people in Mark, I'm a Gopher. Okay. I got to tell you, Mark, that rev share money, that 20.5 million, the Gophers part of that's going to go to our men's hockey program, even though we can't win the national championship over the last 20 years, even though I'm bitter about that rev share money is going to be higher at the University of Minnesota than anywhere else. Okay. We have the most revenue with our men's hockey program. We create $8 million. We're almost at $8 million. The only other non-revenue, it is a revenue sport, but the only non-basketball football program in the Big Ten that comes close to that revenue is Nebraska's women's volleyball. They're at about 7.8 or something. Politically, we can't our athletic director cannot get away with. There's a good, decent slice of that's going to, I'm talking like, I shouldn't put out a number. It could be like 2.5 million. It could be what other programs put to their men's basketball program. So that's going to affect our rev share with our football program. Okay. Mark, we might be a sliver under middling Big Ten programs, right? We might be a little bit less because we have this men's hockey program that we got to feed, or the pitchforks will come to the athletic department. So how each athletic department is based upon, of course, the revenue that each sponsored program produces. That's the number one. But number two is the internal political, cultural issues of that athletic department. So It's going to be fascinating. But I think most pro athletic departments are going to put 75% of their rev share to the football program. And how that gets distributed through their roster. Do you load up on the quarterback? Do you, I don't know, man. It's going to be fascinating. And the Deloitte clearinghouse is also a big part of this. They're going to have to deny or pass through these submitted NIL deals. And how tight does the Deloitte clearinghouse, how tight are they in denying or passing through these deals is going to be a major storyline, right? They're going to have all these submitted deals, all these NIL deals worth over $600. And I'm just guessing here, Mark. I don't have any information on this, but I'm guessing because they haven't told us how this is going to work. But I'm guessing this is going to be done by some sort of AI algorithm, something that you put some, Mark Rogers, Columbus, Ohio, blah, 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 backup field goal kicker, whatever it is, it gets submitted. And then the business is, you're going to put Mark Rogers' face on the car wash business, on the windows, whatever that is. And then it's going to shoot out what your value is. And that deal has to be in line. I think that's how it's going to be done. I can't imagine it's going to be done person to, I don't think they're going to be staffed to the point where you could. So how Deloitte Clearinghouse runs is something nobody knows. Everyone's losing sleep over it. But we don't know how it's going to happen. Another fascinating part to this whole thing.
Folks, we got Greg Pflugar on the line from College Football Peek Around the Corner. And so you got to check out Greg's channel if you're unaware. Greg, when do you go live next?
Oh, I do not know. One of the things about our channel is you always have to keep your head on a swivel. We could come on live at any time covering breaking news. We already did a live show today. So we cover everything in college football, national, like Mark Rogers. So give us a listen, give us a chance. A bunch of college football sickos watch our program. So we hope you join us.
Well, we're right there with you, Greg. You do a great job. Absolutely. That's why I certainly gave you a buzz concerning this topic.
Yeah.
And so everybody check out Greg's channel for sure. I used to approach it that way. I just showed up when I showed up. I had the ESPN gig, and then even after that, I just show up when I could. And man, maybe people are just getting used to this 4 p.m. time slot too much. I got to start shaking it up.
Yeah,
maybe we'll do that. So, Greg, you probably remember the days when you would open up the USA Today sports section. And on the first day of the Major League Baseball season, and they would list everybody's salaries. You just mentioned how these are going to be private, but it would just be fascinating to get the complete list and then start comparing and say, really, he makes that much and he makes that much. So here's my baseline thought about that. And you may be able to bring some better clarification. And this is not a nuanced approach at all. Of course, if I was in charge, I would give it much more research and thought. But this is the baseline approach that I just think you are getting into the weeds and you're getting into difficult situations and decisions if you try to dissect that our left cornerback made 37 tackles and 2 interceptions, and our right cornerback made 39 tackles and had 3 interceptions. And you just try to figure out all of that business. I'd give everyone the same amount of money. Again, this could be nuanced, but everybody, we're looking at roughly 100 athletes, 105 at 20.5 million, roughly $200,000 a year. Everybody gets $200,000 a year because to me, the NIL is going to kick in, and that's where the stars are going to differentiate, and the first teamers and the decent players, and that's where the disparity in income should occur.
If the NIL is, if Deloitte Clearinghouse is loose, like if they let the big deals happen, that's the problem. We don't know. Like it could be, they could be denying these NIL submitted deals. They could be hitting. They could have that denial stamp and going boom, boom, boom on all these submitted deals. We don't know how much. That's why everyone's front loading their NI deals right now, because they don't know what's going to happen July 1st. It's a mystery. It's nobody knows how this is gonna, like, the NI, like, just a couple of days ago, Michael Alford, the athletic director of Florida State, he came out publicly and he said, look, in these NFL players, NIL deals, unless it's a national brand deal, these are minimal. These are like $25,000, $30,000 deals. They're not, most of them aren't these big deals. So according to the understanding of the settlement and Deloitte Clearinghouse, they're looking at these NIL deals as, what is your true market value? What is your true name, image, and likeness in the business that you're dealing with? What is your true value instead of this pay to play value? So your idea, Mark, if you're going to come in at $200,000 for everybody, but if Deloitte is tight, if they're denying all these deals, then your big time players are going to be looking to exit. But I don't. And then you're looking at how many years, like, so I'll just take Timothy Johnson in the chat room. Timothy Johnson gets recruited. He's a center. And how many years is it going to be the contract? Is it going to be 2 years? Is it going to be 3 years? What if Timothy Johnson is a 6'5" left tackle, and we know he's going to take time to mature? He might be a 4-star left tackle, but we know he ain't going to be worth anything in year one, right? He just isn't, because he's not going to be ready to play. Is it going to be a two-year contract? And then these contracts are going to be filled with buyouts, just like a coach's contract. These are student athletes, in my opinion, unless they get some magical carve out from the federal government. These student athletes are going to have more freedom to move to another college because they're students. You're not going to be able to keep them at a college, unlike an NFL contract, unlike an MLB contract that are under CBA's agreement. So if you're a student, you sign a contract, there's going to be buyouts in this contract. So if you are a left tackle and you got paid good money in that first year, but it's a 2-year contract, and if you go into the portal, which I don't think anyone's going to be able to stop you, there's going to be compensation coming back to that school, either from the player or from the team that he's going to go to. So I think there's going to be a lot of that, but it's not just the money, it's how many years of the contract are you going to put on a guy. That's a whole nother strategy that could go all different ways, in my opinion.
All of that makes total sense based on what I know of these type situations. But Greg, I will say you're hurting me in this way, because when all this started to kind of just steamroll with the transfer portal and NIL, and then all of this toward, it being an occupation, the one saving grace that I foresaw in this was, okay, for you, the college football fan, and I'll compare it to the NFL, Greg, and I don't know how much you love the NFL. If you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, or are you across the board a sports fan?
Yes, the Vikings are definitely way behind my beloved Golden Gophers, but yes, yeah.
So obviously you understand how the NFL works. Mm-hmm. Obviously there's a salary cap that's tied to the income of the league. And so it's all regulated that, hey, the league made 3% more than they did last year. Therefore you get this, and it's all regulated and so forth. And also that there's an intrigue, I think, for the average NFL fan, where there is stability, but there's intrigue in free agency. So that the bulk of your roster is coming back, and players and fans can become attached to their team and attached to their players, but there's still this interest in this entertainment of limited free agency. So you get the best of both worlds. And the NFL has done almost everything right over the last 70 years anyway. And that's just another thing. Where in college football, of course, the angst is any player at any time could be gone. And there is a sense of pride with these fans, as you know as well as I do, Greg, that when you turn on an NFL game and you see that, man, John Jansen, Michigan, you see, Antoine Winfield,
Yeah.
Minnesota,
Yeah.
that there's a pride there that those guys always just only played for one school and it was always my school, and that's gone. And so with these contracts, I thought maybe the saving grace would be there's still going to be some player movement, but there's going to be some level of stability brought to this situation.
Maybe it will. Maybe your dream will come true, Mark. If they can, again, it has to be a federal carve out, because we're not going to go to a collective bargaining agreement. I want a collective bargaining agreement. I've wanted that for years, but we're not anywhere close to that to happen. I mean, none of these university presidents want their student athletes to be employees of their university. None of them. So the commissioners, none of them want to do it because, and I don't want to go too deep in that rabbit hole, but they think it's going to be a slippery slope to their students that do research for the university. It could just cause just incredible chaos. So they don't want to go down. So they're saying no employees, no collective bargaining agreement. So then our hope is to have some structure in this sport, because you just eloquently described what us fans need to keep interest in this great sport, to put our money on our eyeballs into this great. We need some structure like you just described. So our only hope is there's a federal carve out in which the leaders of this sport, college football and college athletics, can actually enforce the rules that they make. Because right now they're unable to really enforce anything because they get shot down by all these courts, state laws that are being produced in all these different states. So they need a grand federal carve out, antitrust exemption, give these leaders the ability to enforce the rules that they make. But even that, my worry is that now labor is not going to, again, we're going to go back to where labor is not going to get enough representation in this deal, back and forth. But they did get some representation in this House versus NCAA settlement, obviously. And so hopefully there's a carve out. Hopefully we get some structure. It's not going to be perfect. But hopefully we get something like that. And maybe within that, there's going to be the college football can have some enforcement over the transfer portal, for one big example, like limited free agency, limited movement. Maybe that's going to be a part of it. That is the one I'm most skeptical about, because these are students first. I mean, they should be able to go to the college that they want to go to, but we shall see. But you're right, Mark. We need guardrails in this college football, or people are going to lose interest. I don't want to sit here. No fans want to sit here. No, who are you going to get to be head coaches of these programs? I mean, every day you got to recruit your own players. I mean, these guys are, it's
exactly.
Yeah.
Years ago, Greg, who would have left a head coaching job at UCLA to be an offensive coordinator, or left a head coaching job at Boston College to be, or UCF to be an offensive coordinator? These guys I just want to coach football and X's and O's and coach players and coach football. Absolutely. And, before we came on live, you brought up a situation that we're seeing unfold at Tennessee.
Yeah. Because
we've got these wide-ranging topics of NIL, transfer portal, and as soon as we get used to kind of the way it's playing out, at one point the transfer portal early on was simply, guys see the depth chart, they don't like where they're at, they're moving on, or somebody needs a quarterback, they're, and then every so often we get hit with a story like last year was the UNLV quarterback after 4 games, team's undefeated, they're contending for a Mountain West Conference championship. No, I'm going to sit out the rest of the year. We get hit with the, what really irritates me, Greg, is when player A, Caden Proctor, will make him an example. Well, first of all, the situation with him, as you well know, is even worse because poor Iowa had him committed all the way to signing day. Then he
Yeah.
flips on signing day. He's the toast of the town in Iowa, goes to Alabama, plays the whole season. Nick Saban retires. Caden Proctor comes out. They roll out the red carpet again for him. He sticks around for 4 or 5 weeks and then decides, I'm going back to Alabama. Well, he has basically wasted their time, wasted their resources, wasted their time in communicating with him, all of that sort of thing. Enroll him in school. He takes up, well, in his situation, he didn't get to spring practice, but a lot of these players, they'll go to spring practice for a particular team and then they'll move on to another team. And all they did is tie up reps for the guy they could have been playing in spring practice.
Yes.
It's just so incredibly annoying. And now Moose is bringing up, as you and I discussed before we hit the record button, Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee and what might be going down there. That's somewhat unprecedented.
I don't know. I mean, Moose demanding $3 million a year, or he's transferring. I haven't seen that report. I know he's renegotiating with Tennessee. I asked Mark before we came on live, is it Tennessee renegotiating with Nico, or is it Nico renegotiating with Tennessee? I don't even know that. I don't know. I mean, is Tennessee Volunteers offensive line going to be any better this year? I mean, they had difficulties the last couple of years. Sampson did all the work for them, and Nico was running for his life. Not that Nico is a rhythm quarterback anyway. It's not like he goes in the pocket and gets rid of the ball real quick, but I don't know. Again, it's booster money, NIL money for now until July 1st. Nico's probably doing this because maybe after July 1st, he ain't going to be able to get that NIL money. I don't know if he's worth it. I have my doubts. I mean, Tennessee's got some pretty good quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, Merklinger and McIntyre. So I don't know if Moose is a Volunteer fan. I'd like to get his take on if they should even redo that, Nico.
Moose is a Michigan fan.
Oh boy.
He's a Michigan fan. Greg, I definitely want to respect your time. So just let me know when you need to leave.
We're good. We're good. Whatever you need, sir.
So I wanted to get after this ACC situation that came down, about 6 weeks ago at this point. Of course, the suits filed by Clemson and Florida State, and the countersuits by the ACC. We had 4 different suits going on at the same time in 3 different states. And obviously they came to a settlement, which I got to say, I'm not as deep into this anywhere close to the level that you are, but I've never remembered a situation where schools and a conference there was that much tension, angst, words stated publicly that I thought that there was no return. But obviously the money and the power and protecting your interests, trump all that eventually. But we got a situation with the ACC where they've got a new deal. They've got, $19 million in exit fees, and that's going to come down by about $18 million per year to where it caps at 75. So it's really manageable for these teams going forward. So the ACC, in my view, Greg, has spared itself for a limited period of time, but the time is running out. I ran some numbers that I ran by some people kind of similar to you that I really respect that know this sort of thing. And I went through the TV ratings for the last 2 years and put a percentage together that went with the 60-40 split of the 60% based on revenue and TV ratings and the 40% that's equally distributed. And it just really broadens out the amount of money that these schools are going to make, that on the high end, Florida State in particular, Clemson, et cetera. So what do you think that leads us to? Do you think at the end of the next television contract, those schools are going to look for the out? And, I'm not asking for a prediction because it's been difficult for any of us to make predictions about what's going to happen. But, what did that deal tell you about what we can expect in the future?
I honestly, Mark, I think it's going to happen way before the next media negotiate.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, it's not imminent because there is so much going on in college football to where the four power commissioners are working on this with the federal government. They're all just went there. They're working out the college football playoff. There's governance stuff. They got so much stuff to get through. So I don't think it's imminent. I don't think it's this year, but I think 26 and 27 we get movement. I have stayed away from predictions all the way up until April 8th, 2 days ago. I really believe, Mark, I could change, and if I'm wrong, I'll take the big L here on the Mark Rogers Show, or if things change, I'll let people know. But I really think when the SEC moves on this, that they're going to move large, and they're going to move it's going to be a transformation of their conference once again, just like when they brought in Oklahoma and Texas. So we talked about this last year, Mark, and I did a report on June 15th of last year in which I got raked over the coals by many, many people out there, as you know, Mark. But 6 weeks later, those reports came out, and it was accurate in that Florida State and Clemson were not the number one targets of the SEC. They were not the number one targets of the Big Ten, but they're highly valuable brands. They're going to get to where they need to get to, but they're not the ones that the Big Ten and the SEC were looking at first. But recently I have, as I talk to people, Mark, as you know, I think the SEC, when they move, they're going to go big, and I think they're going to get what they want. And I think what they want is the SEC presidents they're going to want Virginia, North Carolina, for a lot of different reasons. I don't want to take up your time on your valuable show, but there are reasons they want those two schools for student apocalypse. The student apocalypse that's going to be happening, doing their, increasing their footprint, international students. There's a whole bunch of reasons why they want North Carolina, Virginia. And I think to help grease the skids with ESPN and other reasons, I think they're going to bring in Florida State and Clemson. I think it's going to be a huge 4-team expansion by the SEC. And I think they're going to, I don't think the SEC is going to play within, I don't think they're going to do a marginal move. I think it's going to be a massive move. And then that next question is, then what happens to Notre Dame? Because that ACC scheduling agreement goes away. The ability for Notre Dame to fulfill their obligations to NBC gets much difficult. I just redid, I did an episode in a live show on an article in June of 2024 where Bavacqua, the new athletic director at that time, was already saying it's getting harder and harder for us to fulfill our obligations to NBC, and what would happen if Florida State and Clemson left the conference. Well, 10 months later, Florida State and Clemson have won a massive victory in the courts. There is a cost certainty when to get out of the ACC. The ACC would have to accept their check. You got the SEC sitting over there, Mark. But I just want to get this out. The SEC is sitting there pro rata with ESPN. So the teams that they bring in, ESPN's got to pay them full freight. 17, 18, 19, 20. The SEC is seriously looking at going to 9 conference games. The SEC is seriously looking at an aggressive scheduling agreement with the Big Ten. The SEC is aggressively looking at playing games because they're going to probably get the 4 automatic qualifiers. The SEC is looking at a more aggressive bowl tie-in between the SEC and the Big Ten. So this is all going to create another media negotiations with ESPN. if you brought in Clemson and Florida State, the SEC would get a little bit more money in the playoff distribution because Clemson and Florida State have been to the playoffs. They won the championship over the last 10 years. The SEC's percentage would go up. So I think Clemson and Florida State, what I have heard, Mark, lately is for the SEC presidents to get what they want with Virginia and North Carolina, which is what Pete Thamel has said, which was Heather Dinich has said, which is Brett McMurray. They've all reported the same thing because they're all getting leaked the same information because it happens to be true. That's what the SEC presidents want. And for them to get what they want, there's a there's a belief out there that they're probably going to have to bring in Florida State and Clemson to get it all done. And then the next question is Notre Dame. How can they continue to do what they're doing without that scheduling agreement with the ACC? Because if the SEC is going to 9 conference games and they're going to have a crossover game with the Big Ten, how many games are Notre Dame going to get with the big brand schools going forward?
So, Greg, it's been my thought ever since this started to unravel with Oklahoma and Texas, and certainly you're the guy in this area, so correct me if I'm wrong, is that what seemed to be the incentive for the SEC and the Big Ten was one of two things. Either assessing the field and saying, we've got 2 more schools out there that bring value to us, or 5, or whatever the case might be. Mm-hmm. Assessing each school and saying, do they bring us value in whatever areas? We start with money, of course.
Yeah.
That we can add. Incentive number 2 would be, the SEC went out and grabbed Oklahoma and Texas. They're already better than we are. We need to make a counter move. And obviously we saw USC, UCLA, and then Washington, Oregon kind of hung out there. And there were all sorts of speculation after they applied and were accepted. So my thought there is then, does the Big Ten, yes, aggressively go after Notre Dame? Of course, Notre Dame's going to continue to do what's in the best interest of Notre Dame. You know, this is not the NFL where the owners get together and they do what's the best for the common good. You know, each conference acts in its own interests, and that's not good always for the sport. If somebody could take over this sport, I don't know if you're up for the commissioner's job, Greg.
No, but, nope. They've got me blacklisted, Mark. Nope. The Big Ten has me blacklisted for one, but go ahead.
You would have certainly my consideration to take that on. But, just in regards to, I'm looking at Notre Dame and Miami possibly being a counter move for, I've always felt that the Big Ten had everything, check the boxes. They have everything except a recruiting footprint that is anywhere close to the SEC. And that them driving a stake in Florida, planting a flag in Florida would be huge.
And that's part of what that's part of what I talked about on April 8th. It was the Miami Notre Dame situation.
Okay.
So Miami, University of Miami is an interest. So I was brought all this information just recently about how Miami became AAU a couple of years ago, and so they do about $400 million, $460, whatever the number is, when it comes to research expenditures. About $175 million of that is National Institute Health funding. And Miami is big on genetics research and things like that. Exactly what the Big Ten universities, Michigan, for one, really wants in the conference. Probably the big reason why Miami became AAU. Probably the big reason why the Big Ten presidents voted Miami AAU. So Miami has been, looked at, poked and prodded, turned over, evaluated in so many different ways and reasons. And the presidents believed they should be AAU. They became AAU. By the way, so did Notre Dame at the same time. So in Miami's market, Miami-Dade is about 1/6 of the GDP of the whole entire state of Florida. The national advertisers of Fox would love to get into that market. So at the people that I have talked to recently, I have said, okay, so, Miami, I mean, if the presidents are for them and the network probably, they're a lock, right? They're a lock to be in the Big Ten. And the answer is not quite, because Miami doesn't control their own destiny. I mean, Big Ten target is number 1, North Carolina, which I don't think they're going to get for lots of reasons. Internal politics, the board of governors at the state of North Carolina don't want to waste your time. I just don't think Big Ten is going to get North Carolina. So, and the other big target, of course, is Notre Dame. So, but Miami, after that, I think is in the catbird seat. And I think one of the great advantages I don't know about I don't think the SEC, I don't think ESPN wants there to be any opportunity for the Big Ten to grab a Miami and a Florida State and have that blend. I don't think they want that to happen. Now, the Florida State Big Ten we talked about this, Mark. The Big Ten presidents are not going to, maybe they can warm up to a Florida State. Maybe that can all happen, but it isn't there yet and all that. But I don't think the SEC wants that Miami-Florida State thing to happen in the Big Ten. Another reason why people that I talk to believe it's going to be a big scoop by the SEC. And then it goes to Notre Dame. And the question is, can Notre Dame keep going the way they're going are they going to be able to fulfill their obligations to NBC? If they cannot, then they're probably going to be looking at the Big Ten. It pretty much is their only option. And then that opens it up for Miami in a possible Stanford situation. But Miami is Miami's in a very good spot for the Big Ten.
You just brought up the school I was going to next.
Yeah.
So real quick, before we leave Florida State, I'm sure you saw the articles that came out. This was probably 6 months ago, where I didn't realize, and I assume it was a Dellinger, a McMurphy, I forget, to credit the right writer that I found, just some of the anonymous quotes that were being stated by athletic directors, board of regents, high-end people in the Big Ten in a derogatory fashion about Florida State seemed to be pretty stunning, just in regards to their lack of respect for Florida State.
Yeah, and I've heard, as you know, Mark, because you and I have talked about it off camera. Unfortunately, all that was true. There isn't. Again, Florida State is an unbelievable brand, an incredible fan base, massive, to the point where they're going to be able to get to where they need to go. You cannot stop that. They're going to be able to get to where they need to go. How they get there may be a crooked line. They're not the number 1 targets for the Big Ten. Not back then, not now. But I don't think they can be stopped. I think they're going to get to where they need to go. I don't think it's going to be in the Big Ten. But I don't think the SEC is going, and I don't think ESPN is going to risk a chance of that happening either.
And certainly for us that just care about the football and whatever cultural fit or football fit still exists with Rutgers playing UCLA, where it's been completely messed up. Nothing says Big Ten like a Rutgers-Washington game, but Florida State and Clemson, they regularly schedule non-conference games against the SEC. Obviously, they're in the territory. Yeah. It makes sense. 2 quick notes, Greg, on Florida State that I find interesting as well is I looked at the last 20 or 25 years of AAU votes, and to see how often that occurred, because I was very unfamiliar with the process,
Mhm.
but that voting process, first of all, it's not a every 2-year deal.
Mhm.
It's not a set timetable. It's
Yep.
whenever they decide that they want to look at particular schools. Number one. Number two is that Florida State, obviously, they're close. They are in the running. They're in that final round of qualifiers. So
Yeah.
they're getting there.
Yeah, they're getting there. Now, there are also other reasons, and what we might as well just push the envelope a little bit more here. Again, this is I'm talking. I don't want to put this negativity on Mark Rogers. So if you
Hey,
need
I'm a big boy, Greg. I'm
okay.
fine.
Um, so okay, so we know the reality that Notre Dame has said no to the Big Ten for many decades. But it's never been a no, slam the door, don't give us another phone call, right? There has been serious talks over the decades. The reason why Notre Dame left Hockey East to join the Big Ten in men's hockey is because Notre Dame did not like the competitive nature of Hockey East, that they had to travel by airplane every time they went on the road, while the other Hockey East programs just had to take a bus. That little bit of uncompetitive advantage took Notre Dame to call evil Big Ten and say, "Can we join you in your men's Big Ten high?" And the Big Ten said, "Yeah, let's do this thing." Right? Notre Dame, again, this is Greg Flugart talking, so don't send the letters to Mark. Notre Dame doesn't have a good relationship with Florida State for many reasons. One, Notre Dame doesn't like to travel to Tallahassee. Jack Swarbrick has said this publicly. He has said this privately. Notre Dame has said this privately many, many times over. Recently, Notre Dame is the one who sponsored the expansion of Stanford, California, and SMU into the conference, right? Of course, Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, they did not vote for that expansion because they're looking for the exit ramps. I mean, there is so much going on and so when the Big Ten is looking at future, if we choose to expand this conference to 20 or even beyond, a little bit beyond 20, Notre Dame has to be part of that equation. Does Florida State get us closer to getting Notre Dame? It just doesn't. That is part of this as well. It's just the and there's a lot. I mean, Notre Dame, when Florida State sued the ACC before they were able to sue, ACC technically sued Florida State the day before. Technically, they got in there. Notre Dame, a full voting member of the ACC. They said yes, go sue Notre Dame. When this latest scheduling deal between the ACC and this ACC settlement, right? They had, they're trying to. Phillips is trying to figure out a way to keep Florida State happy, not to keep Florida State happy, but to get Florida State out of the courts, to get Clemson out of the court. Okay, so they had this scheduling agreement between Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and Notre Dame. Well, Notre Dame wanted this badly because they're struggling to fulfill the obligations to NBC, to get the highest paid payout possible by NBC. So they're saying, yeah, let's do this thing. But the agreement is Notre Dame is going to play Clemson every year. Not Florida State, Clemson. They don't want to play Florida State. So it's even in that, Notre Dame is like, okay, we'll have to take Florida State because so many eyeballs are on that because they're such an incredible brand, but we're going to play Clemson more than we're going to play Florida State. And the Big Ten knows all this. So that is another reason why there's hesitancy to there are, Miami is a higher target for the Big Ten than Florida State. It's just that's there is not one person that I talk to that would say differently, that I talk to personally. It doesn't mean that Miami's a bigger brand than Florida State, because they're not. They're not as valuable as brand as Florida State, but there's other things that are in the mix. Politics, culture, location, academics, research, and just personal relationships are a big part of it.
Folks, Greg Pflugar is here, and you can catch him on a regular basis, of course, on his YouTube channel, College Football Peek Around the Corner. So if you're not familiar, you can get this stuff from Greg directly on a regular basis. And I appreciate, Greg, of course, you stopping by to educate me and everyone else. And it's a great conversation. So before I move on to Stanford, one other note about Florida State, just to confirm your opening statement about the brand and how strong it is. You know, people are looking at 2-10. Folks, just consider that Florida State had what I believe were the second best TV ratings in the conference, even in a 2-10 season. It might have been second or third best TV ratings compilation in a 2-10 season. So obviously still a strong brand that's followed nationally.
And just one other thing, and I forgot to bring this up, I apologize, but so Notre Dame is big on travel, right? They're a national brand, Notre Dame. They're an independent football program. So when they schedule and they're trying to figure this stuff out, they really want to be able to get to a place, easy. They want to be able to, and when you're looking at, Tallahassee is a place that they have complained about. And there's not much, it's not much Florida State can do about that. I mean, they can try to rebuild that airport and everything, but in the Big Ten, when you're talking about Piscataway to southern Los Angeles, you're talking about, you want direct flights everywhere. You want to be able to get there quickly. Well, Miami, direct flights everywhere, right? There's another location in an ACC school, I think, we all got to keep an eye on, that might be part of a possible expansion for the Big Ten, is Atlanta with Georgia Tech.
Okay.
So just putting that out there. I mean, this is what the Big Ten wants. They want big markets, get in and out. We're a big national thing, and that's what Notre Dame wants. Another reason why Florida State is not above Miami in the pecking order for Big Ten.
Very good. I was going to throw out Duke basketball and the impact there, and Atlanta with Georgia Tech, and obviously a great NFL city. The market's exploding and has been for a couple decades. But you brought up Stanford, and I was just about to go there, because from the time that this started to unravel now 3 or 4 years ago, I immediately went to Stanford and thought that was going to be a Big Ten target. And I was dead wrong at the time, and maybe it'll end up that way. But I just figured, and I know people roll their eyes and think nobody shows up at the games. They've gone 3-9 for about 12 straight years, it seems. But we're only a decade removed from Stanford going on a 7 or 8 year run that was top 5 in the nation. You can win there. And just the endowment and the prestige of the university and all of that, it just, especially in this new age, just screams Big Ten to me.
They have been Stanford's been a Big Ten target. But there's always something getting in the way. I mean, Fox wasn't willing. I mean, Kevin Warren wanted to add Stanford in California, and Fox said no. And Kevin Warren was too out in front of his skis and had terrible relationship with Fox at the end and all that stuff. One issue about Stanford, and it's the same with Duke, is they have their own research consortium going on. They're part of a different research world. And I don't think there has been even hesitancy on Stanford's side, in which do they really want to join the Big Ten consortium on research. So that has been one of those backroom type of situations, unlike a Miami and a Georgia Tech that would fold in quickly with the Big Ten consortium. Duke and Stanford are connected. So that is one issue. The Duke the Duke basketball brand is huge. It's a big plus for them as a possible candidate. I think the Big Ten would have to expand even more for them to be included. And of course, that all has to do with Notre Dame. And of course, Notre Dame is going to have a big voice in this, right? What they want. And if they say, we got to bring Stanford in, because they sponsored Stanford into the ACC. But for now, we even have Miami ahead of Stanford just because of the latest that the Big Ten presidents are. They look at Miami, even though it's a small private university, Southern Florida, culturally they're Big Ten. The market is big. They want that diversity of that market, and they look at the university. They look at Miami as a Big Ten institution.
How likely do you think we're headed toward a true Big Ten SEC dominated sport? Of course, they unofficially dominate it right now. And who's going to get left out? And I'll add this addendum to it, Greg, because this is what fascinates me as well, would be this situation. North Carolina, Miami, Clemson, Florida State, maybe somebody else, or maybe two other schools get plucked up by the SEC and the Big Ten. Will the ACC be able to maintain what is going to be kind of a high-end American conference look with the Wake Forest and the Boston Colleges of the world and Syracuse, and maintain something? And how we would deal with that from a playoff standpoint in football, I don't know. But anyway, like a 10 or 12 team ACC, or does the Big 12 swoop in and the likes of NC State, Louisville, those next tier schools of football playing ability and cachet, how attractive are they to the Big 12? And is the ACC going to be able to hold together something, or will the Big 12 just pick the rest apart, and then Wake and others will just have to run for the hills and hope that they latch on with the American Conference, I guess?
Yeah, it's very it's very difficult. I can't even come up with a guess. One of the questions I have I can't get an answer to is, let's just pretend that that SEC poaches the ACC for next year. And let's say they grab 4 schools. Let's just pretend that happened. And each of those 4 schools are paying out $147 million each. Okay. And according to the ACC bylaws, they have to have that money ready to pay out 30 days after they officially become a member of another conference. So that would be July 1st, July 30th of the following year. So that's $147 million out of 4 schools. We're just pretending that happened. How does that $147 million times 4? And I'm not good at math, Minnesota math, not good. But what's 147 times 4? How does that money?
I think we're around 188 if I did that correctly.
147 times 4, 147 million.
Oh, it's 140 and 40, 640. So
548. 545.
Yeah, 14 and 4 is 560. There we go.
Okay.
588.
Okay. How does that money get distributed, Mark? I mean, we don't know if that's going to be like, do you have to remain a member of the conference to keep getting that money during the years? And so that's going to affect the decision making of a Louisville, a Virginia Tech, whoever doesn't get poached, right? So the Big 12 may have an advantage, may not have an advantage. And then when they did this ACC settlement deal, we don't know all the particular, like there had to have been some language somewhere where a Boston College, a Syracuse, a Wake Forest, they got some security out of this, not just the exit dollars, but some sort of like confirmation from ESPN that, if enough of us hang together, we'll be okay. I mean, the ACC network's going to get destroyed. The value of that is going to be that's going to be a tough thing for ESPN because they're actually making money on that currently. So it's hard to know the survival percentage of the ACC when you don't know how the exit money is going to be distributed. I got a feeling that it's going to be like not front loaded, but back loaded to try to keep the Virginia Techs, the Louisville, the Pittsburgh, keep them in the conference. But if we could find out that answer to that question, then I think we could figure out the possible survival percentage of some sort of ACC surviving.
Well, Greg, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being here. And once again, everybody, please follow Greg on X/Twitter. You see his handle right there. It's his basically Flug Empire. So you can find it right there. It's on the banner. And again, it's College Football's Peek Around the Corner right here on YouTube. Greg, it was great to see you. And maybe one last thing is we want a little forecast on the Gophers this year. And are you in the PJ Fleck camp? Are you in the PJ Fleck camp? Because this, when I bring up lightning strike coaches, guys that move people one way or the other, he's one of the first guys I bring up. I just want to get a reaction out of people about PJ Fleck because
I love the guy. Baby. Row the boat. Now, you asked me that question last year, and I said I'm all in on PJ Fleck. Whenever he leaves, be it getting fired or he ain't going to get fired anytime soon, but if he decides to take another job and he has had some opportunities, I think he would have taken that UCLA job if they would have had any money. When he leaves, he's going to leave the place a lot better than when he came. So I'm all in on PJ Fleck. Last year when you and I had this discussion on your show, I was talking about this steam coming out of camp about Max Brosmere. And I was shocked because it was the first time ever that people were talking positive. It's like, we don't have quarterbacks at Minnesota, right? The last NFL drafted quarterback was 1972. I mean, last year we actually completed the modern day forward pass during the season with Max Brosmere. Well, but of course, he was only with us for 1 year. It looks like he might be drafted, Mark. He might get drafted 6th or 7th round, which is gonna, stop the streak, the embarrassing streak of Minnesota Golden Gopher quarterbacks. But this year, remember the name Drake Lindsay, redshirt freshman. The next time you have Daniel House on your show, you ask him about Drake Lindsay because he was there. He watched him. Drake Lindsay so what is going on is like last year, he was a true freshman. He came out of Arkansas. He was the Arkansas Player of the Year, Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Arkansas. His grandfather was a Minnesota Viking Minnesota Viking running back in the 60s. He spent time in Minnesota. He liked Minnesota. PJ Fleck got him. Drake Lindsay spent last year learning under Max Brosmere. They were together always. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, always on the football field. And Max Brosmere can't say enough things about him. So far during the spring camp, PJ Fleck, go look at the press conference after practice. I think it was yesterday that Daniel House was at. PJ Fleck said Drake Lindsay is the best young quarterback I have ever coached, I've ever seen. So again, no one has really seen him play. I mean, he only got a few snaps in last year. He's 6'5". He throws the ball effortlessly. He has complete command of the offense. His accuracy needs a little bit work, but he's got he's got like a Josh Allen arm. So again, the Gophers are getting pretty good respect coming into this year from unlike last year. If Drake Lindsay is the real deal Holyfield in his freshman redshirt freshman season with Darius Taylor and Koya Perch, the great safety, who, by the way, they're going to have him on offense this year. In spring camp, he's wearing 2 colors in his jersey, one for offense, one for defense. You know, Travis Hunter, the next Travis Hunter, Koya Perch. If it, you know, it could, I ain't saying, but I'm saying the Gophers could be at that 8-win, 9-win season again, even with the redshirt freshman quarterback. So we shall see. There are, and I'll leave it with this. There is somewhere like our defensive line is our interior. We have no depth. We need to get lucky in the portal. So there are worries, a lot of worries on our roster, but the quarterback is going to be remember the name Drake Lindsey, Mark. Drake Lindsey.
I know the name. I just didn't know what to expect of him because I've obviously not seen him play. And I knew that there, up until this conversation, I thought that there might be a quarterback battle between Lindsey and Zach Pyron, but you're telling me no comparison between the two.
The Zach Pyron thing. I mean, he wasn't even getting the second reps with the 2. So he has fallen. I don't know if there is no report of injury. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's, I shouldn't say anything more, but he's not getting the 2 reps either.
Well, you don't want Zach Pyron to be your starting quarterback at Minnesota in the Big Ten. Absolutely. And I'll just leave you with this and certainly tack on anything that you would like. To me, Greg, USC and Nebraska are the most fascinating teams in the Big Ten this year.
I'm trying to figure out a way to disagree. Those two in just that in Penn State's starting quarterback. I think he's the biggest wild card, and he's got it, but he doesn't got it. You know, if he can just have what?
That's a good way to put it, actually, because I defend the guy a lot, but some of those mistakes I can't defend.
If he can just have the intangibles. I mean, Penn State beat Minnesota 26-25 last year.
Great game.
Franklin won. The head coach won that game for Penn State.
Big fun.
He sat Drew Aller down and he got him under control. That game was going pear-shaped for the Lions. He got him just enough under control. They made just enough plays to escape a victory over the Gophers. So that's the thing I'm talking about. I mean, Drew Aller could lead that team to the Big Ten championship, to the national championship, but he might just fall apart too emotionally. Nebraska's got a lot of juice out there in Lincoln. They got a lot of juice. Dylan Raiola, I think the world of his talent. He sounds like he's in shape. Sounds like they got a receiving core. I love that they got rid. I love that offensive line over the last 4 years finally graduated because they were so below average. They were. I mean, but finally they got some new guys in there. So Nebraska's fascinating, and USC should have been a lot better last year. Lincoln Riley, all you had to do was keep running the ball against the Gophers, and you would have beat us. But you got pass happy. So Lincoln Riley, I'm a little worried about, but man, they got a lot of talent out there.
They sure do.
Yeah.
They sure do. Certainly, even in their performance last year, the most disparate team from ceiling to floor can go out and beat LSU and beat Texas A&M and outplayed Penn State. That game went to overtime, but then they can lose to Maryland.
Yeah. Well, the Maryland Minnesota games were like, just give the ball to Woody Marks, give the ball. I mean, they just got two, I don't know what, very poorly coached games by Lincoln Riley, really, truly. So I don't know.
Dave Valensky, thank you so much for the super chat. And Dave bugged me a few times to make sure I read this while you were still on the air. But Dave, we do thank you. Mark has a Gopher fan on today. I watch both shows and love both of you guys.
Thanks,
thank
Dave.
You so much, Dave.
Appreciate it.
Well, Greg, it was great to see you. I know that you're super busy, so thanks for stopping by here. And again, everyone, it's College Football Peek Around the Corner with Greg Pflugar.
Try to have me on before the season starts so I can give you more Golden Gopher propaganda, Mark.
You've got an open invite here, Greg.
All right. Appreciate it, my man.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Absolutely. Greg does a great job. Appreciate him coming on. I am going to grab the link and open up the phone lines if anyone would like to call. And no, we don't have phone lines like we did at one point, but we do have the StreamYard link to pass on to everyone. I'd like to let everyone know that we've wrapped up a few guests for next week. We've got Peter Burns stopping by from SEC Network. Peter has joined us a number of times throughout the years. Great guy. And he was going to show up this week, but he pushed us back to next week. That's a good thing, though, because Peter was on vacation, had a birthday, all those good things. So Peter Burns, class act, really nice guy, great guy, knows his football, loves his college football, LSU guy through and through. But Peter Burns, SEC Network coming on. I believe we're still working out a day. We're going to bring our Indiana guy by. He's got a bone to pick with me, does our Indiana guy, Alec Keyser. So that should be interesting. I said some things to offend Alec concerning Indiana football. So Alec's going to come on, but he is doing an amazing job with the Indiana channel. So check out the Indiana channel here at the Voice of College Football, and they get together on Tuesday nights. And Minnie Hunt's going to drop by next week to talk some Nebraska football and maybe some things that I possibly said against her beloved Huskers that she didn't like. But we will certainly look forward to seeing Minnie next week. Let's get those calls going. We got our buddy Chris Foote on the line. Chris, what's going on today?
Hey, Mark, I missed your show.
You did? How dare you?
I'm sorry.
I did a complete two-deep depth chart breakdown on the 1984 BYU Cougars.
You did?
I did. It's fascinating.
I want to know what you decided, though.
I decided that they really lost 3 games that season.
Yeah, which 3, by the way?
How are you doing, Chris?
Good. Oh, can I talk just a second about that, if you're okay with it, or no?
Sure. I hope you understand that everything I just said was a joke.
It's okay to me. It's your. I know you do your own analysis, and so it's not up to me to tell you what to do with it.
Okay.
There might have been 2 or 3 games they could have lost. I know they almost lost to Hawaii. The only reason they didn't was there was a goal line stand where Kyle Morrell did kind of a front. I don't know if you've ever seen that replay of it. He did a front flip tackle on the quarterback that if they wouldn't have done it, it looked like they might have gone ahead for a touchdown and might have won. Of course, BYU still won the game, and they had to score, I think, to win. But so there's a potentially at least a 1 loss that they could have had without. And then they barely beat Wyoming. That was a tough win for them. And then I'm trying to remember. They almost lost to Pittsburgh, I think. So you're probably right. It's almost 3 losses.
So again, Chris, I was just kidding. And why were you calling today? What was on your mind? Don't let me divert you to any kind of sarcasm. We'll get back to what you wanted to talk about.
Well, no, I think one of your points of contention, if I'm not mistaken, is, and if I'm not right about it, go ahead and let me know, that the schedule itself wasn't really one where you can really demonstrate a team being capable of winning a title. Wasn't that kind of your point?
I'm going to remain silent on the topic because you know why, Chris? I would love to talk college football history with you about any team in any year outside of 1984 BYU. I think we have, like, what is the old saying? What is the old cliche? Beating a dead horse. We're not beating a dead horse at this point. We've he's beat to death beyond
Can I leave you with one
recognition.
Thought? It's just a thought, and it's
sure.
Not really.
Give us a thought. Give us as many thoughts as you want. I just don't want them to be anything that I have to respond to. But the floor is yours to pontificate on BYU.
How easy do you think it would be to beat Cincinnati 12 times in a row? That's basically, and I know a team that did it. So, and it's your team. So it's as easy as Ohio State winning 12 games against Cincinnati was how easy it was for BYU to go 12-0. And the reason I know that is I compared the schedule to my ratings, and it said that the average team that they played that year was about Cincinnati's strength.
Cincinnati when?
Just I think I already told you.
1985 Cincinnati, 2017
Well,
Cincinnati. When Cincinnati?
I don't think it's a historical. It's like anyway. Ohio State has won 12 successive games, so it's as easy as what Ohio State's done. If that's easy to do, then I guess it's easy to do. So that way
Okay.
you don't have to pick a side. You can say it's as easy as Ohio State winning 12 as against Cincinnati because that's what they've done is win 12 against Cincinnati. So it's that easy to do it.
All
Which kind
right.
of tells me, well, no, which kind of tells me it's as easy as Ohio State doing it. And I don't know that it was especially easy for Ohio State to do it. And it really isn't about me, Mark. It's just that you want to pick on the schedule. And I took the low end of it too, by the way. I didn't pick the high end of it. Actually goes up as high as Southern Methodist, but I don't really want to use that number because I don't think that's probably a fair comparison. But if you think it's easy to beat Cincinnati 12 times in a row, then which Ohio State's already done, then I guess it's an easy thing to do. And then, like I already told you, they had to beat Michigan in a Holiday Bowl where the one thing I can tell you about that, they interviewed Jim Harbaugh, and he said he's never seen that team so excited to play. I don't know, just a sideline interview. But I don't know that it was a matter of not having a good team to play. And that was your entire argument, I thought, against the team with being a champion, unless I'm mistaken.
Chris, if I said right now that BYU in 1984 was the greatest college football team of all time, would that end this discussion?
Well, no, the way I tried to explain it was they couldn't do it all by themselves. That's kind of been my point the whole time. I said that they needed help. Even after winning all those games, they still needed help. And the only way they got it was because Iowa was as good as they were. And Iowa can't win a championship either without, the 1957 championship. They can't claim that championship either without help. It's just trying to treat everybody the same, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, so
Ohio State, huh?
I was just going to say, Chris, is there anything going on currently that piques your interest at all? Pardon me?
Yeah. There was something currently I could tell you about, but it's all about perspective, I think. The other thing I already told you, to play UCLA, when they played them, they had to beat Boston College, and I don't think that that's an easy game to win.
What are we talking about now?
Well, you tend to point at the things that they didn't do, and I've heard your dissection, and if they'd have played anybody any good, they would have gotten beat or whatever. And I don't know. I guess that's a valid point, but I don't know that they had to, though. Who else do they need to play? You made it sound like they had to play somebody really good. Well, they played Iowa in the Holiday Bowl and they tied them. Iowa was rated number 7.
Chris.
So they're what?
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is what we're going to do. We're going to put a 30-day moratorium on 1984 BYU. 30 days. That's it. You can do it. 30 days.
I already told you.
It's like going on a diet. I did a juice cleanse for 4 days a couple weeks ago. You can do it, Chris. 30 days. Call me about anything you want to, excluding 1984 BYU. You can call me about 1974 BYU if you want.
How about the fact that they beat the 2 teams that Illinois lost to the previous season? How about that? That doesn't matter?
Again,
that's not important.
If I say that BYU in 1984 was the greatest college football team of all time, will that end this conversation?
No, I want you to determine on your own who you think the better team was. It's not my place to tell you who to pick, but I think
it is not my.
What?
In none of these conversations, nor in the video that sparked all this, going all the way back to 2020, did I ever state that BYU should not be given, or did they not earn a national championship?
Washington, but anyway, that doesn't
no,
really bother me either because you can pick
at this point, I'm going to have to go back and watch that video.
You said
Washington. We're going to have a watch party surrounding that video. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, the other thing you did was you said that they had BYU as a 4 seed to like a 14 playoff or whatever. I don't know. The one thing I kind of would like to know, since you had them in the 14 playoff, was how you know for sure that Florida beats BYU. You said Florida, the number 1 seed, beats BYU, the number 4 seed, and that's what you told me.
I
And
have
then,
never
then you have,
stated in my entire life, my
yes, you
career,
did.
that any one particular team would definitely have beaten another team.
Well, you
I
said,
don't
yes, you did.
state that ever.
I'm not lying. So anyway, you said Florida gets by, because you said they were number 1, BYU's number 4. Said you have
Okay.
the number 1 seed beat the number 4. You did.
I'm going to
I
make
mean,
one
don't
statement. Then, Chris, you're going to be allowed to make one other statement. Then we're going to move on to our next call. And that would
Sure.
be that I started a video series looking back at disputed national championships. I did 1983, 84, 2000, a few others, 1990. And I produced a couple, and I wanted to stay out of the realm of telling people who I believed would have won the game. But after I produced a couple of those, I received nothing but comments from people wanting me to say who I thought would have won the game. So I kept the analysis of the resume separate from me stating at the end of the video, this is who I believe would have won a game. I'm not saying I'm guaranteed or that there's no question that would have happened. I'm just stating my opinion that so-and-so would have won a particular matchup. Okay, you've got the floor, Chris. You got 10 seconds.
Well, I already made my point, but what it boils down to is they played the number 1 team in the following season and they lost 24-27. So I don't want to hear how like I'm partisan BYU. If I'm so partisan BYU, I'd have them beating UCLA. I don't pick a team either. I just tell people what I know is to be true. And I kind of get mad when people don't take my word for being honest, because I'm as honest as I know how to be.
All right. Well, we don't want you to be mad, Chris.
And Ohio State won 12 successive. They could keep that trend going if you want it. And that's what BYU did. So they're as good as Ohio State as far as Cincinnati goes, in my opinion.
Yes.
Well,
BYU is as good as Ohio State. Absolutely.
Against Cincinnati, sure.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for calling.
And if they don't like that, they can use the comparison against Ohio State. Go ahead and
That's
do that
right.
too. All right.
Thank you, Chris. Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. We got our buddy Dave stopping by to talk some Minnesota football. I guess, Dave, appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Other than my knee hurting like crazy, I have a cyst on the back of it. It hurts like hell.
Ooh.
Yeah, I can't even straighten my leg to a certain point.
What are you doing about that?
Right now, I'm gonna have to go to the doctor and try to see if I can get it removed, or find out what the heck is else going on. Because they told me to ice it for a while and see what happens, and I iced it as much as I possibly could, and it hurts still. So it's been 2 weeks. I blame the Wisconsin Badgers because I was watching the Badger basketball game against BYU. Speaking about BYU.
Yeah, please.
Right.
I don't want to hear those 3 letters for
no one cares about the Book of Mormon school. But yeah, I was surprised that you had a little bit of your competition on today.
Competition?
Well, the guy does the same thing that you do.
We have all sorts of people on here that do the same thing that I do.
All right.
No?
All right.
I don't see it that way. There's room for everyone.
All right. Well, I like both of you guys.
I've had Greg on, not as many times as I would like. He's certainly come on every time I've asked him, but it's not. I go through spells where I don't really have anybody on, and I just talk for 6 months, and then I get a bunch of good guests on. I kind of go back and forth, but yeah, Greg's great. I couldn't tell you exactly how we connected, other than I believe he started to follow me on Twitter because I make it a rule not to go out and follow anyone on Twitter, so they follow me first. But anyway, then we obviously followed each other, and I discovered that he does a great job tracking all this realignment news and so forth.
Yeah. I wish I caught most of that realignment news, because I'll be honest with you, Mark.
Go back and watch it, Dave. Give me another
Yeah.
view. Just go back and watch it.
All right. I'm just one of those guys that once college football is over, I stop paying attention, start paying attention
Sure.
to other sports.
Yeah.
So, I just kind of
Sure.
saw him and saw you talk, and I'm like, oh, I'll just go onto the show for a little bit and see what's going
Yeah.
on.
I was a little surprised to see you. I haven't seen you since
Yeah.
football season, but I get it. Do you watch baseball?
I watch pretty much everything. I will right now. I am deep into hockey playoffs
Okay.
and college hockey is going on right now. The Frozen Four is going on. Go Western Michigan. That's the only school I care about right now. I had two cousins that went there. Even though I am my parents are Central Michigan alums.
Okay.
It's kind of weird to cheer for the Broncos. But
Wasn't
no,
it
this,
you who told me last season that you and your dad went to a Western Michigan football game?
Central Michigan.
Central
Central
Michigan.
Michigan football.
Okay.
Yeah, we went to the San Jose State game. That was a great game. They came back and won that game by a last second field goal.
Very nice.
But yeah, shoot, I'm getting a little excited. I do hear because I work at the U. I do hear the football practices going on right now for spring ball, and it's just it gets me a little excited to see what the Gophers are going to do. I don't know much of what's going to be going on. I know the quarterback situation is going to be an interesting race, but like he said, Lindsey is probably the guy, and I look at it and see we're more worried about the wide receivers because we did lose a couple. We did lose a couple good wide receivers because of graduation, but at least it wasn't transfer portal stuff. The other problem I always feel if the Gophers have is keeping coordinators.
Yes.
I just found out they are the lowest paid offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators and special teams coordinators in the whole Big Ten. So that's just probably just more of a university problem than just a PJ Fleck problem.
Well,
So
I would think so. I would think that PJ would want more funds to go to his coordinator so he could go out there and get who he wants.
yeah, well, he's always good at getting who he can get and always replacing, but this has been a Gopher problem for years. I mean, this isn't just, a PJ Fleck thing. Like I said, the university doesn't really do very well with paying their coordinators. The same thing that Glenn Mason used to say the same thing about, the university. That's one of the problems he used to always have is keeping, coordinators and defensive, coordinators of talent. So, but I really just don't have much to say. I just wanted to say hi, basically.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying hi, Dave, since we haven't seen you for a long time. And if we get to see you during the off season, I'll count it a bonus. But otherwise, maybe we'll see you in September.
All right. Talk to you then.
Call me anytime, Dave. Good to see you.
All right, Mark.
Thanks,
All right.
man.
Okay, bye.
That is Minnesota Dave. And we're going to go to our next caller, Adam, here in just a second. We certainly want to honor the super chats and also get to an item from yesterday. We would like to get to an item yesterday that has to do with merch. So let's run down the super chats first. So, of course, John D'Adamo, host of our Michigan Live show on Tuesdays, does a phenomenal job in reminding everyone that you can partner with us here at the Voice of College Football by hitting us up at sponsorships@vocfb.com, sponsorships@vocfb.com. We have never had a sponsor that did not just love and gush about us and our relationship with them and what we did for them. We undersell and over deliver. So please join us. Again, you got a brand, you've got a item, product, service, whatever you've got. And again, in this day and age, personal brand as well. Sponsorships@vocfb.com. Adam's comment here, and thank you so much for the super chat, Adam. We will get to you in just a second. Adam, piling on a Drew Aller again. Drew Aller is the poor man's Neil O'Donnell. And Neil O'Donnell is the poor man's, I don't know what he's the poor man of, but Neil O'Donnell is definitely a poor man somebody. So I guess Drew Aller is even the Neil O'Donnell poor man. Okay, I guess I would have taken some level of offense on Drew Aller's behalf being compared in a unfavorable way to Neil O'Donnell. But at the same time, if Drew Aller goes to the NFL and he's able to start for one of the best teams in the NFL for a good period of time, Neil O'Donnell, of course, with the Pittsburgh Steelers and also the New York Jets, but most notably with the Steelers, and able to quarterback his team within, minutes of a Super Bowl championship, I guess Drew Aller would have turned in a decent NFL career. So there you go. He throws to the wrong team in the play. Oh, that's where the comparison comes. I didn't read the rest of the statement. You remember the 1996 Super Bowl, Neil O'Donnell throwing 2 passes directly in the breadbasket of one Larry Brown and made Larry Brown a Super Bowl MVP. I could have caught those 2 passes. Larry Brown was just standing there in coverage and just boop. And neither one was a pick six, but an almost pick six, boom, right in the breadbasket. And he ran one back to like the 5-yard line. Then the other one he ran back considerably as well. Yeah, so that's the legacy of Neil O'Donnell, unfortunately. And then, Karen, thank you so much for the contribution there. We appreciate you, Karen. Petition for VOCFB 1984 BYU merch. Oh, that would be an angle, huh? So while we're on the subject of merchandise, it was kind of funny yesterday because while I was in the throes of lamenting our merch that used to exist and letting everyone know we don't have any merch. Sorry. I know I hung this back here and that's very confusing to everyone, but I basically did it because I was checking out some old videos because of doing some research with our guys, TJ and Chris. And I saw where I had a much better looking set way back when. I've got these LED lights and they're doing us absolutely no good. Can you see them back? You really can't. Yeah, they're doing us no good. I'm going to have to position them differently. But I had the nice mic. I didn't have this piece of garbage. We had a nice mic that's in that closet right there. And we had a backdrop and we had helmets all over the place. And I had a table here that had helmets and a helmet display over here. And I had merch hanging. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to go find this shirt. And I washed it because it stunk. It smells good now. And hung that just like I had it hung on the previous set. But then, of course, I'm confusing everyone because then I had people asking about merch, which I appreciate. So, unbeknownst to me, while I am lamenting our merch demise, the wonderful Leanne Herring is in the chat at the same time letting people know, hey, we'll get you some merch. And so I'm just seeing people throw some money out there, boom, 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 boom. And I'm just thinking, well, I'm such a wonderful broadcaster and host that people are just throwing me money, not knowing that she was behind it all. So we are going to take your orders. So based on what we took down here, we owe Adam, Jim R., Minnie, Dave's here. I believe those are the 4. And so whatever, based on what you gave, it's going to be some combination of hoodies, t-shirts, and or hats. And just give me your sizes. We'll take your sizes. So you can send me an email at MarkRogersTV@gmail with your sizes and your addresses, and we will get those out to you if you so choose. All right, let's finish up on the super chats. And we've got Ryan here. Badgers will take back the axe this season. That Wisconsin team looks rough to me right now, especially against that schedule. And they got pummeled by Minnesota last year. And PJ Fleck finally is turning around that series in Minnesota's favor after Wisconsin dominated forever and recently won 14 straight. Ryan, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. We will be doing a deep dive on Wisconsin later in the offseason, just like we do with everyone else, and I will educate myself. But we've got a quarterback battle between Danny O'Neill of San Diego State and Billy Edwards of Maryland. All right, welcome into the Voice of College Football. There's Adam. Adam, how are you?
All right, Mark, how are you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Of course.
So I'll be really quick. I was listening to the discussion that you had before, and my first thought is this. Instead of this NIL chaos and these players making demands, particularly ones like Nico who aren't very good, why don't we just have universities designate these players as employees and sign them to 2, 3, 4-year contracts that spell out their salary, what happens in the event that they breach the contract. That way you don't have this unpredictability and instability with the transfer portal, and you have some predictability with who you're going to have on your roster. What is the legal I don't see any legal implications of that. So what are your thoughts?
Well, you would know that better than I, but based on what I've looked at in the past, I would agree with you because I don't believe that there are legal issues standing in the way of that happening. I believe that that is simply the powers that be, meaning presidents, administrators, and the NCAA wanting to at least continue the facade that this is a student athlete run sport.
Okay, so they can continue that facade, but it's really a lot of it's really devoid of any substance. And another thought I had is that these universities could be subject to antitrust lawsuits, particularly the ones that have all the money, okay? Because basically they're monopolizing the top players because they're able to buy them. And I think that might be a novel legal theory that could gain some steam in the federal courts. And I just don't know why these universities don't institute a market correction through contractual obligations. It's better for every university, except for those that think that they have so much more money and are so greedy that they think they can one up everyone else. But I think ultimately that does run into some antitrust issues. So I think the ultimate issue for the NCAA is let's treat them as employees, let's call it what it is, and let's have contracts that bring some stability to the sport. That's my thought.
So I would say this, Adam, and again, I am stepping into your territory, and you know so much more about this from a legal standpoint that it's not even a joke, that if there would be a lawsuit from an antitrust standpoint against the schools that we all know that run the sport, I would think that those schools would have some type of counterpoint, possibly a counter lawsuit, in that they have agreed to Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, etc., the ones that get all the TV ratings and put all the fans in the stands. They have agreed to a situation in which there is equal distribution of money when there shouldn't be. So that's actually to their credit that they have gone along with this collegial model for so long while they're generating all the money and should demand an unequal distribution in their favor.
They could make that argument, but when you look when you look behind the curtain, it's kind of like saying, well, everybody is treated equally because a specific law applies equally to everybody. But when you look at actually how that law is implemented, it disparately impacts certain organizations or institutions. And I think here, that type of disparate impact theory is relevant because what you have is the top maybe 5 to 10 schools that are basically able to dominate the market and create a quasi-monopoly because they have the money to do so. So they claim that they may be if the argument is that they're not being treated equally because they have a right to demand an unequal share, they're creating an environment that is precisely the inequality that they claim to be the victim of, the result of which is creating a very top-heavy college football sport, and really a disparity that does not resemble equality in any sense. So I would say, number one, contracts, and number two, look into an antitrust lawsuit if that doesn't prove to be something that is realized. So just my thoughts. Always great to be on the show. A great show today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Okay.
Have a good night.
You too.
Again, I'm speaking to a lawyer when I'm speaking to Adam, so I cannot necessarily speak out of turn because he's going to be able to one-up me on any type of legal point that I make, but I just don't see the clarity in this being a monopoly or there being antitrust issues involved when it could clearly be stated by, again, the schools that dominate the sport financially that they have been pretty gracious. And I understand their motivation is not to be gracious, but it's basically just, we have a collegial model that has existed forever. And this is where the tension points have hit. You got a collegial model that was built under the guise of this being a club sport. Basically, originally it's a club sport. It's a recreational sport. And then it gains more and more traction and becomes more and more important. And then you start to cut corners because you need your best wing back at the time to skip his final class to get more practice time or change his grade so he's eligible for the big game against Carlisle. And then, it starts to, of course, gain more and more importance and more attention, more and more fans. Students are wrapped up in this. Teams start to travel. All of this is just spiraling and building momentum. And then it becomes popular. And then you've got 10,000 people at these games, and then 50,000 people at these games. And then it's on national radio in the 1930s and 40s. And it keeps going and going and going. And then television hits. And that's really when it started to become a business. It's really been a business since the 1950s. Probably technically a business before that. But once we hit the 1950s, and these games are on television. And so anyway, originally a collegiate model, but it's a business. So those things have been at a tension point ever since. But we arrive here in the year 2025 and pick your opposite ends of the spectrum schools in any conference. Florida State, Wake Forest, Ohio State, Northwestern, Alabama, Vanderbilt, in terms of revenue, eyeballs, so forth. Michigan fans, put you right there with Ohio State. I wasn't trying to differentiate. Ohio State, Michigan, basically in the Big Ten, Northwestern at the bottom. These schools that have dominated this sport and brought the revenue to the sport, they have been in a position where they share equally. Nothing that Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, on down the line, Michigan, Notre Dame. Well, Notre Dame doesn't share with anyone. They're not in a conference, but all the teams that we would go to, Texas, Nebraska, etc., the ones that make the money, meaning the ones that make the money for the conference and for the NCAA and for the greater good, they draw all the attention that earns the money, but they have been willing to split it evenly. I'm not saying that they're nice people or pure in heart to do such things, but I'm surprised that those, and it probably goes back to Adam's point about antitrust laws, that otherwise the power brokers in this sport, the 10 or 15 schools that run the sport, wouldn't go to their conferences and do exactly what Notre Dame or what Florida State did this past off season. and say, not good enough, not sharing money with Rutgers and Maryland. That's a bad example because Rutgers and Maryland are still not getting the full share in the Big Ten. Not sharing money with Illinois and Northwestern because we make all the money for the conference. We're going all the national championship games. We're going all the Rose Bowl games. We're watched by everybody. Just think about how many games does Northwestern have to play? If we added up Northwestern's television ratings and the amount of people that watch their games, which would peak when they play Michigan and Ohio State and against Iowa, Penn State, Wisconsin. But basically, it takes them years and years to play in front of the same number of people on television as Ohio State and Michigan play in 1 week. Years. And they split the money. How long did Indiana sit at home? Indiana didn't go to a bowl game from 1991 to 2007. 16 years. And then they went on another drought after that. They couldn't even get to a bowl game, and they're sharing bowl revenue with Ohio State and Michigan for all those years. It's really crazy when you think about it. So Adam says the revenue does not mitigate the competitive advantage. But what brought about the competitive advantage? There is nothing that's in the way of these smaller schools, despite except for their size, that is causing this. Ohio State, Michigan, whomever. I always hesitate when I go to the obvious example. Throw either one of them as we're looking at the Big Ten. Penn State, Minnesota. Who's the larger school? Minnesota, the University of Minnesota, Penn State. Minnesota's the largest school now that UCLA is in the Big Ten. I believe UCLA and Minnesota are the largest schools in the Big Ten. What competitive disadvantage do they have? Is that a competitive disadvantage? And they get the same share of money. How is that a competitive disadvantage? I understand Wake Forest is a competitive disadvantage. They got 8,000 students, or Duke. But how many schools are either marginal or suck at football? They got huge schools. Indiana, huge school, sucks at football. Minnesota, marginal at football, a non-factor since the late 1960s. Huge school. UCLA has not fielded for more than one season at a time, has not fielded a good football team for 25 years. I know 2005, a couple of years ago, they one-offs, but I mean consistently good football. Where's the competitive? You have to be competent at what you do at some point. If we had one restaurant open on one street corner and across the street another restaurant, they're both Italian restaurants, and we give them the same amount of money, and one of them sucks because they don't know what they're doing, they don't know how to market, their food sucks, their service sucks, and then the other restaurant does everything on point, and then 10 years later we say they've got a competitive advantage. Well, what is it? I don't know. It's just that they're better and they make more money, and they drove the other one out of business. They must have had a competitive advantage. No, they didn't. They were just better. And I'm not saying that there aren't competitive advantages along the landscape of college football. Of course there are. But they're basically based on school size Other than that, why doesn't Northwestern go buy a bunch of players? They get the same cut as Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State do. They get the same media rights deal. And what is it supposed to be the big school's fault? Ohio State, USC, Penn State, Michigan. Is it supposed to be their fault that Northwestern can't draw flies to their games? Is it their responsibility? Like, I don't get that point. When there are actual disadvantages, absolutely. We could have this same conversation about society. When there are legitimate competitive disadvantages, absolutely. I want those individuals, those organizations to be given a lift when they do exist. When they don't exist, let's not pretend that they do exist and that we need to help everyone. All right. I thought that might have sparked somebody to call me up and pat me on the back or kick me in the teeth, one or the other. Because, man, I could go on a rant about that. Happy almost Friday. Okay. Very good. So again, between Adam, Minnie, Dave's here, and Jim R, if you would like some merch, you just hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail, and I will. Okay, there's a difference here, Adam. I don't know that you're hearing me. I'm not saying that this is not problematic. I'm not saying two things can be true at the same time. It is problematic, but it's not their responsibility. It's not their fault. So we're just going to arbitrarily take from the rich and give to the poor, even if they didn't do anything, even if they're already giving to the poor. We already have a situation where the haves are giving to the have-nots. They're already doing it. What is Northwestern doing on the football field or in the box office at their stadium or in TV ratings to warrant $80 or $90 million coming their way in media rights? They're doing not a damn thing. They suck. They're no good. Nobody watches them. If they're not playing a team that has a pulse that brings in the gate, both in person and on TV, Northwestern, I love Northwestern. I root for Northwestern, but let's face facts. They're irrelevant. Nobody cares about Northwestern. When, again, we'll stay in the Big Ten, when Ohio State, when Michigan, those two in particular, and other schools to a certain degree, when they're playing the Western Michigans of the world, Fox puts them on TV because they will draw more people against than Northwestern will against anybody else in the Big Ten. That's an incredible difference in draw. It's not even close. What is college football supposed to do about that? And the schools that actually run competent football programs, they split the pie evenly. What else are they supposed to do? I would like an answer to that. So Todd says, yes, Mark, just like the NFL. Adam, you can debate this more. You obviously, we get the line out there. Just grab the line. Anybody debate me on this? I don't know what there's to debate. Again, it would be a different debate if we had revenue distribution inequality and we said, okay, well, so right now in the Big Ten, you got 18 teams. Let's make the math very simple. Let's say they all get $100 million. That's $1.8 billion, right? Yeah. it would be one thing if this was the real world and Ohio State got 27% of the pie because they brought in those TV ratings, and Michigan got 26% of the pie, and on down the line. And then we could have an argument and say, is this really good for the sport? But they're already dividing the money equally. What else are they supposed to do? Like, if you've got an answer, I would love to hear it. I would love to hear how, and in schools like Indiana, I will point at Indiana first and foremost, and it's not the best time to do that because they're coming off this remarkable 11-2 season, which their best win was against Michigan. They beat one team with a winning record, so they really weren't that good, and they beat 3 high school teams in non-conference play. But I'll point at Indiana, bad example, but again, they were horrible for years before that, for the most part. They're getting the same revenue share through media rights. What is Penn State filling up 100,000 seats, and Ohio State 100,000 seats, and Michigan 100,000? Are they supposed to take their ticket revenue and also say, we'll give this to Indiana and Northwestern too? Have some of this too. We know you had 38,000 people at your game, and we had 110,000 people at our game, and we know that most of the people didn't even pay that much money to go to your game because you had to sell the game basically for a pittance, and we can draw top dollar, but we're going to take our gate of what's 100,000 times $100 a seat. It's $10 million, right? And we made $10 million on our gate today against Western Michigan, and you had 38,000 seats, and you had 50,000 seats, but you only sold 38,000 tickets, and the average one was like $14. So you made $700,000, and we made 10 million. Are we supposed to give you some of that money too? Really? What am I missing here? What am I missing? All right. What else? We're going once, we're going twice. Yes, Jim, a cap. A cap. Do we still call them caps? It's a cap? Okay. I don't know. I'm leaving this up to Leanne. She's the one that made the promises, and she says she can get it done. So I did not realize that we were promising merch, and I've got no problem with it, just so it can be produced. I don't need to make a dime off of it, just so we can produce it at cost and pass it on to all of you that spoke up in the chat. So I appreciate Leanne doing that. That's very nice of her. And she says she can take that on and get that done. So just hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. And let me know. Again, I believe that's Minnie, Adam, Jim, and Dave's here. All right. For tomorrow's show, we will not be here at 4 p.m. Eastern time. We will be here late night. We're doing one late night every week now. You have spoken and said, bring back the late night show. Well, we're not going to do that like all the time. We're going to do that once a week, and it's going to be based on your preference. So Tukey G, where are you? You said Friday night, and I'm going to deliver Friday night, 11 p.m. Eastern time. And then one of you is going to let us know tomorrow night that you want it the next week, whenever, at 2:00 in the morning on Thursday, whenever. I will show up at any time. The only thing that could possibly change that is if I am able to have some plans that would be a little bit more favorable. That otherwise, I thought I was off the hook, thought we were going to get out of here, but we got Adam showing up, who's going to strike me down on this one.
No, Mark, I think this is a great debate, and I appreciate you continuing it.
Of course.
And always great to have debates like this. I actually have to teach an ethics class at 6, but I told my students we'll meet at 6:15, just so I can respond to these
You're this
excellent
important.
arguments that
Okay.
you've made. So I understand your point about revenue sharing, but as a matter of law, revenue sharing does not defeat antitrust violations because it does not eliminate the competitive advantage on the front end that these teams have in getting top-notch players and winning championships. And
Define the competitive advantage, though. There's nothing systematic that makes for the competitive advantage. It exists because of brand and tradition and all these things that have been built up through the years, and just the sheer will and competency of these schools that want to win in football.
I agree with you that the brand of a university absolutely gives teams a competitive advantage. However, in the era of NIL, a team like Rutgers cannot spend $10 million buying a Bryce Underwood. That is the competitive advantage that these teams have. So they can share as much revenue as they want on the back end, but on the front end, they have domination over the market in getting these 5-star players. And you see it in the recruiting rankings every year. And that's the problem. Okay. So I'm not a person who believes in equity. I do not believe in that. I tend to be more conservative, but I do believe that there should be, if the markets are going to work effectively, there has to be reasonable competition. And when you have schools that can pay a $10 million for a Bryce Underwood or a whatever, or $5 million for whomever, and other schools can't, that's where the competitive advantage results in them having, essentially a monopoly over the playoffs and national championships. I'm not saying that.
I'm not disagreeing with the problem, Adam.
Okay.
I'm disagreeing with what is the solution to that's fair. And also, let's understand that it's not the schools that are, at this point, it's not the schools that are paying Bryce Underwood. This is an NIL collective that is paying Bryce Underwood. So
I know it's an NIL collective.
Are we supposed to be encouraging all the Rutgers? So if Rutgers can only gather up $500,000 to pay whatever players are coming into their system for the current recruiting class, are we supposed to suppress Ohio State and Michigan and say, you can only spend, let's hear from Rutgers first. Give us your number. Okay. Yeah. Okay. You can only spend 500,000.
Well, as far as NIL
can't do that legally, can you?
Well, I think you can.
Nor is it right. It's not right to do. Well, I'm more on the side of what's right.
Well, okay. So what's right depends on the objective that you are trying to accomplish. And my objective is to create a competitive market. Okay. That's what capitalism is based on. So there's two interests we have to balance. We have to allow the brand name and the history of a program to have a competitive advantage that they have earned throughout their history. We want to make sure we retain that, but we don't want to have money being the, kind of catalyst by which they have total domination over the players that they can get at the expense of other teams. So my answer to your question would be there should be a cap. There should be a cap on the amount of money that you can pay a player so that we eliminate the monetary advantage, but we still allow these schools, of course, to use their brand names to recruit the top players like the Ohio States and the Alabamas. There's got to be at least some reasonable degree of fairness, or else the market doesn't work correctly, and you have what you have now.
Who says that the market's not working correctly? Well, so I'm running a YouTube network. So am I able to go out and survey other YouTube networks and say they're operating on a $10 million budget? It's not fair for me to compete against 247 Sports and their shows. Is that fair? I'm operating on an individual budget, but I'm competing in the marketplace against 247 Sports and others. Where are they supposed to give me their money?
Does having a $10 million budget, or let's say a $100 million budget, guarantee you that you are going to get 1 million subscribers or make a certain degree of profit?
Let me tell you this, Adam.
What matters is the content is going to be the independent variable here.
Well, I will make this guarantee. I will make this guarantee for sure that supplying me with the funds that is comparable to my competition, I am a hell of a lot more capable of competing with them on those terms than Rutgers is competing against Ohio State on the same terms.
Well, but the relationship is more indirect between your budget and your ability to, become someone who gets, say, 10 million subscribers. In the situation in college football, that money is the direct and proximate cause of these people being able to buy the Bryce Underwoods, the Keelan Russells, and I can go down, and the Arch Mannings, for example. So it's different. Now, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be winners and losers in the market. I'm a pretty conservative guy. I believe in market competition, but you can't have true market competition unless there's some degree of fairness. Now, you want to have a competitive advantage because of your brand and because of your history of winning championships, that's fine with me. But to be able to simply use money as the direct catalyst for being able to buy these players, which is what we're seeing, to me raises an antitrust issue that is not solved by revenue sharing. So my answer would be a cap.
Okay, so then the next issue, and Caden is saying, we appreciate your super chat. Rutgers football is garbage. So we appreciate that intellect coming into the conversation. But then you get into the tricky question of, and I don't want to keep you longer than you can stay. We get into the tricky question of where is that cap? Let's say Michigan can spend 10 million and Rutgers can spend 1 million. Well, it's going to be crucial as determining, is that cap 9 million and that just compromises Michigan's ability, or is that cap 2 million and it greatly suppresses Michigan and makes Rutgers' ability almost maxed out?
It depends on the stage of the recruiting process. So we would have to have different caps for, say, high school recruits versus transfers. I don't know what that number would be. I would need to be around a panel of really smart people to look at empirical evidence and think about that, and economists who would help me determine what probabilistically would create, I don't want to say an even playing field, because I do believe in competition and winners and losers, but what we're seeing here is not competition. What we're seeing here is Michigan can say, Bryce, we'll snatch you from LSU because we can afford to do it.
But
and
what is that
that's a
inequity? So I have a big question, or I guess the crux of the matter to me, as it is in other societal realms, is where did that competitive advantage originate? If it's an unfair advantage built on a system that is unfair, then that needs to be corrected. But if it's just based on one, in this case, university pouring itself into a football program and just happens to have a larger school and all those other factors that contribute, then that's just the way it is.
Okay. Well, that's the problem I have when you say that's just the way it is, because if, like I said, I don't believe in equity. I don't believe in trying to make everybody have an equal outcome, but I do believe that there are inherent disadvantages when one school can pay millions and the other can't. If there's no competition, then there's no market. And I'm not saying that the brand doesn't give them a competitive advantage. That's a separate issue. And that alone may carry the day. But when you have schools that can outright just take players and buy them, you do not have a true competition. And I think that competition is the essence of creating the type of inequality that everybody would deem acceptable. I don't think the inequality is acceptable under the current conditions. My arm is missing, Minnie. Yes, I went on a diet. It was easy. I just lost 20 pounds right away.
That's all you need to do.
Do you see my point or no?
I see your point. I just don't agree with the premise of it. Again, if it was, in my perspective, a systematic issue, then it needs to be corrected. If it's not, then it doesn't need to be corrected. And again, many of the schools we're talking about are just as large, if not large. The University of Minnesota is larger than Ohio State University.
Right, but the reason that Ohio State has a competitive advantage that's acceptable is because of their history of winning championships and, under some of the greatest coaches that ever lived. The problem lies in the second factor, when now they can, spend millions of dollars to get a Caleb Downs, for example, when other schools can't do that. There is no competition for those players. So a cap on that, a reasonable cap, would ameliorate that problem while still maintaining the competitive advantage for the more historically prestigious schools. So, you kind of get both goals accomplished without creating equity, which is a bad thing.
How about this competitive disadvantage? There aren't as many good football players in the state of Ohio as there are in California, Texas, and Florida. So should Ohio State be able to say, you need to bring some of your football players into the state of Ohio and play for Ohio State? Because we've got a competitive disadvantage.
Because that would be equity. And that would be the problem. So I'll give you one analogy before I have to go teach my students ethics.
They've got a competitive disadvantage based on location.
Right, but that's the kind of, I'm talking about acceptable competitive advantages versus unacceptable ones. And to me, an unacceptable competitive advantage is when you can simply buy players. For example.
That sounds even more legitimate than what you're talking about. We're running a football program in Boise State. We got no football players here. We got to go get them from California and elsewhere. That's a competitive disadvantage.
But it's in the acceptable type of disadvantage because you don't have a single organization that can single-handedly distort the market. For example, if I fly Delta Airlines, maybe you fly American, maybe you fly United. If American Airlines and Delta Airlines could offer flights for 30 cents and everybody went on those flights, it was sure as hell would make a lot of money, but no other airline could do that. So would you say that that's acceptable? Because then everybody in the country would be flying on two airlines.
I would love to know, again, the parameters and the causes that led us to that point.
Well, that's the whole point. And the reason I said American and Delta could lower it to 30 cents is to give you the example that revenue sharing alone is not sufficient. Because American Airlines and Delta would basically put themselves into bankruptcy, but nonetheless, they would have a monopoly on the market. So it's not just the effect of how much revenue you share or how much money those airlines would lose for such a dumb decision. It's that at the front end, everybody in the country would be flying Delta and American. That's the problem, and that's what you have in college football.
So, Adam, I think generally we agree, but I'm stopping short of going to your lengths because there is already equal revenue distribution. So we've already gone a great length to help out these schools.
Yeah, while they're holding the national championship trophies year after year after year, and these schools don't have a chance because they're not being able to compete for these players based solely on money. That's why I think a cap is important. But I will say this. If you have a better solution, I'm all ears. Because I'm not saying
Solution to what?
The solution to the fact that the top handful of schools are able to get the best players year in and year out, not just because of brand, but because they have collectives worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And that is a typical antitrust violation. And I suspect that will be a problem. But again, don't confuse me as somebody who's trying to just level the playing field. I believe that playing fields should be level, but I do believe there should be inequality of outcome. But the criteria for determining that has to be based on fair means. And I don't think the means are fair.
And I think we have an issue trying to determine what is an outcome that is going to be acceptable. We've had 21 teams make the playoffs in the last 10 years. We've had all sorts of schools. We had SMU make the playoffs this year. So who's going to be the judge and jury of, okay, now it's okay. Now we have enough teams that are competitive.
Well, who won the national championship? Ohio State.
Sure.
Who's won the national championship in the last 50 years or less, say, since 1990? I think you'll find that it's a pretty small group of schools. And if we want to believe in capitalism and, we want to believe in creating a competitive market, that is not solved on the back end by revenue sharing, because you're still on the front end creating a very unequal playing field. And that's the antithesis of what capitalism and market economies do. Now, I would be willing to sit in a room with you and a lot of other smart people and try to figure this out. The NCAA isn't going to do it. So I think that we need some people like you, like yourself, to debate these issues. And I think we could come to a reasonable solution, because I think that you and I generally agree upon the underlying philosophical principles driving this. So how we get there? Well, I'm offering this solution of a cap. If you don't agree with it, I'm open to your solution. And if you don't think there should be a solution and that the status quo would prevail, that's where I would disagree with you.
I guess because of freedom of choice in this country, I have an issue with saying, all right, Michigan boosters, NIL collectives, stop. You can no longer give any more of your money that you have the freedom to give to a university in their football program. You have to stop now. You can't give any more.
Okay, so then let me give you one last analogy before I deal with these students. In a presidential election, if
Yes.
Joe Biden had $5 billion and Donald Trump had $5 million, the outcome of the presidential election would most likely go Biden's way. Now, if Biden decided to share revenue after that and say, I'm going to give you half of the money that I had in my campaign, all's well and good. The problem is the presidential election was not the result of a fair, competitive choice. And that is the problem here.
All of that makes total sense,
America great
Adam.
again.
All of that makes total sense, Adam, except for the largest component of revenue in this sport, media rights, is already shared. It's already shared.
Yes, but is it reasonably competitive in recruiting players when you have the Ohio States and the Texases and the Alabamas versus the Rutgers, the Northwesterns, the Iowa States? Is it competitive? Absolutely not. And that's the problem. You're looking at it on the back end, I think, when I'm looking at it on the front end. And for those of you who say you're leaning in Mark's direction, I completely get that. And I think that on the surface, he has a better argument. But I think when you look behind the curtain, what you're seeing is a tremendous disparity that destroys competition. And anybody who believes in a free market has to believe in competition. You would never say that Joe Biden or say Donald Trump should be able to spend $500 billion on a campaign and Joe Biden should spend $5 billion. There's the reason that there is equal spending in politics is because we want voters to be able to be exposed to both candidates on a relatively competitive level. All I'm saying is that the recruitment of athletes should be more competitive through a cap. And then, and I don't think revenue sharing vitiates that. But
and I'm sorry, Adam, based on my perspective, that is not an apt analogy, again, because we do not have equal shares of money going to Joe Biden and Donald Trump like we do with NCAA football teams. We don't have that disparity of $5 billion versus $5 million.
But do these universities have an equal amount of money when they're recruiting candidates? I'm sorry, when they're recruiting players. I don't think they do.
If you look at recruiting budgets across the country, you might be surprised what the results show.
Mark, this is a great debate. I wish I could continue it.
No, I appreciate you. Gotta go.
I have to go, but thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam.
Good seeing you.
Stuff. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye. Yeah, I get his point, but sometimes you want to arrive at a conclusion, but doing the wrong thing to get to that conclusion isn't the best. So, for example, we all would love to arrive at a place in college football where college students are going to class, or I should say most of us want to arrive at a place where they are true student athletes and they are committed to their school and they are playing for the love of the game and all of these things. And as soon as NIL and the transfer portal came down, most of us were cringing, knowing where this was going to lead us off the rails. So, but on the flip side, for the individual, if you are a patriot, if you are an American and you believe in our system of values, I think most of us will agree on this, that you should have freedom of movement, meaning you're a student at a university. You should be able to go to another university if you so choose. And number two, if there are 15-year-old TikTokers out there that can get zillions of dollars thrown at them for doing stupid dances, then college athletes shouldn't be the only people in the world that don't have sponsors throwing money at them. So I think on an individual basis, we would agree that those are two freedoms in this country that should be benefited by all of us, including college athletes. However, the result of introducing those two things has been to the detriment of the entirety of the sport. So to fix that, you can't take away basic rights from the college athletes. Similarly here, if you do believe, see, we haven't even come to a consensus that there is anything wrong with the sport from a competitive standpoint. That's just Adam saying that there is a problem. That's not a right or wrong or a truth or fact. Is there a problem with the competitive balance and the outcome of the games? Well, some of you would say yes, and some of you would say no. I don't think there's a dividing line. I'm not going to play judge and almighty God to say, yes, there's a problem with the imbalance and competitive nature of college football, or no, there's not. That's up to perspective. But how you fix it is not to, again, we already have a model in place that is distributing the largest amount of money. It's not even close. The largest amount of money that goes to these universities and their football programs comes from media rights. And it goes equally, boom, boom, boom. If anything, to take Adam's point even further, then I guess it's unfair that the Big Ten and the SEC make the most money. That's unfair. So they should give money to the Big 12 and the ACC. And while we're at it, give the money to the MAC and give it to the Sun Belt Conference. So those schools should get just as much money as Ohio State and Michigan and Alabama and Georgia. Give them to the teams in the Sun Belt Conference, even though nobody watches them, nobody cares, nobody goes to the games. Give them. So we've got an unfair balance, not just between schools, but between conferences. So instead of the Big Ten being able to strike a deal with Fox, NBC, CBS, and come away with $8 billion over 7 or 8 years, well, we're going to have to say, you know what? We're going to pry a couple billion out of your hands, Big Ten, and we're going to give it to the MAC, and we're going to give it to the Mountain West Conference and Conference USA and all these other conferences, even though you were the ones that were popular enough for NBC and CBS and Fox to say, you're worth the money. We want to see Penn State and USC and Ohio State and Michigan and Wisconsin and Iowa play football, and Nebraska and all these teams. Those are the teams people want to see play football. However, we're going to give part of your money to Kent State and Bowling Green and San Jose State and all these other schools. I'm taking the same logic to the conference level. And SEC, you take your contract, you do the same thing. We're giving it to the Sun Belt Conference and American Conference. And yeah, it all gets spread around equally to everyone. In Arkansas State, you get just as much money as Georgia. Even though nobody watches your games, nobody cares, you can't draw flies, we're going to give you just as much money. And what you're going to do with it, I don't know. Because right now, and over the last zillion years, Indiana football has received just as much money in media rights and bowl and postseason competition. How fair is it? Think about, let's go back to the BCS era, 1998. We'll just start there. That starting in 1998, in terms of the Big Ten, okay, Ohio State's showing up at the 2002 national championship game, the 05 national, or the 06 national championship game, the 07 national championship game. And what are they doing? They come back with that money, the 14 million or whatever it was at the time from the BCS championship game. And Indiana, you get your share. It's just as large as our share. And Northwestern, you get your share. And Michigan's going to a BCS bowl game, and Michigan State went to their run of BCS bowl games and so forth. But everybody else, Indiana, you get your share, and Rutgers, you get your share, and Maryland, you get your share for doing freaking nothing but sucking. But you still, and you can't do anything with it. You still suck. You're no good at what you do. I love my idea of taking Adam's philosophy and let's apply it to YouTube. I'm waiting for my checks from CBS Sports, from 247, whoever else, On3, They can send their checks to me, and I can build a studio. I can hire people. I can have a producer. I can have a graphics person. I do all that by myself. But I would have those people. I could be competitive. I can't be competitive now. I don't prepare 6 hours to do a show. I'm running a business. I just come on here and shoot from the hip. How is that any different? Same, we're just taking it to a different industry. And I don't need as much money as they have, but just give me some. Let's say they're worth, let's say On3's worth, I don't know, $20 million. And I'm worth, I wouldn't want to say, my outfit's worth $50,000. My YouTube channel and the other channel, I'm worth $50,000. I'm not asking for equity. Just out of your 20 million, throw me 3 million. Okay, throw me 3 million. That seems along the lines of what Adam's looking for. Throw me 3 million, and I can buy a bunch of ads. So one part of all this situation, I know I'm going from football to YouTube, is that we grew organically, completely organic, but the 247 Sports of the world and the CBS Sports and whomever's on those channels, On3, I don't know any names, but I know that they obviously have shows like this. Well, they buy viewers to a certain extent. Now they don't pay somebody to watch but they pay for ads, and they throw their content at people, and they paid for that. They saturated the market with throwing their content at everyone, and YouTube takes their money and they push their content at people. My content doesn't get pushed at anyone. There you go. Let's do the same thing with YouTube. There we go. There we go. Anybody in the chat? Anything of interest in the chat that I should address? It does not seem so. All right, folks, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football again. We will do this as we always do Monday through Friday, but not at 4 p.m. Eastern on Friday. We're going to do a late night call-in show, and we'll see you then. Thanks for being here.